All right. Welcome, and we're back. We're back to episode 2. Episode 2, guys. How are y'all feeling? How y'all feeling today?
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. We got new start happening right now. We got new start happening right now. So it's been a little bit busy on our end. Shout out to Brian for pulling together the curriculum of New Start. And
Thank you.
I know it's been a busy time for you, so hopefully you do some good self-care over the weekend and take care of yourself, because it can get a little bit busy on this side of the town. So, but welcome back to our Unfinished Legacy podcast. You're here with the hosts of the podcast, and we're going to be going right into our activity, which is going to be choosing topics out of this bucket. So we have a bucket of random questions that we have for the audience. And these questions are really directed towards our student body. We want our student body to be a little bit more educated on our experiences, who we are just as people, and just, getting more clarity and understanding of what's going on at the U of A, if anything. Y'all ready for the activity?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So I guess I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to go through and just pick a couple, maybe just one, not a couple. We're going to start at a question at a time, and then go from there. Okay. Don't look. All right, it's a lot of questions in here. Okay, cool. Alrighty, so the first question is, how has your identity as a man of color influenced your experiences in college? So I guess this can be towards your undergrad degree. This can be towards your graduate degree as well. This could be going into college as well, however you want to take it. But how has your identity as a man of color influenced your experiences in college? You want me to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking, right? It's hard to pinpoint just one thing. I feel like it's so pervasive, it's not something that you can really separate from. So every space that you're really entering into, that's how it's kind of shifting how you experience that. I mean, it was a big part of how I was trying to find community, or how I struggled at first, I would say, to find community. Also, I mean, in a weird way too, I'm kind of jumping around, but I think a big one that comes up for me also is just expectations that you may have for yourself, for others, that may be internalized, and how that affects how you interact. In terms of just, I grew up, I'm half Mexican, half German, but, so my one half of my family, the Mexican side, right, is super machista, like dealing with machismo and like how everything with that, but also even the German side, right, they don't call it that, but my mom's from Southern Germany, is also super Catholic, super religious, very traditional values. And I think just generally growing up in that kind of environment of how a man, so to speak, should behave. And then kind of when I ended up in college and how that affected me, I think it was like an important part of my journey though, because it led me to really learn a lot in terms of how I grew emotionally and different things. But it definitely put me into a box. I feel like there were certain spaces that I wanted to be a part of that were hard for me to engage with because of like that identity or that experience, because of how people, even on the flip side, I guess, how they view men or men of color and around like safety or violence or different things. I don't know. I'm kind of just, I don't know if all that makes sense, but I feel like it was really interesting. Like just certain like space. I mean, like a good example, right? Even here, one that I think of is like trying to get involved in more like gender fluid kind of like spaces, and what does that look like in terms of folks who may identify as a man, and kind of trying to be able to be within those spaces and what that looks like, especially because like my major was like super a lot. It was just very like demographically, I guess it was a lot.
What was your major?
It was a lot of women. I was a sociology major,
okay,
which I really enjoyed, but it was an interesting like dynamic as I shifted into it, especially because the perspective that I was coming in with was like obviously more connected to being a man of color, but that also that of color part, right, where I brought up a lot of racialized pieces where that wasn't really where a lot of folks were coming in, because I took a lot of classes with a lot of white folks, and it was just so like all those aspects too. And I think that's the other part of it too, is that usually the conversation is around race as well when we talk about being a man of color on campus. It's like how do those experiences of you being racialized, but not necessarily how your gendered experience is, which is kind of what I was alluding to earlier. Because again, like machismo and all those things can like really affect. Like we don't want to find help a lot of times, right? And that's part of it too. So yeah, I mean that can be a good segue. We've been talking for a minute, so.
No, I was just gonna say like everything that you're saying, because like same, I was like, how do I answer this question? But it just totally reminded me of like my unwillingness to ask for help at that time in my life. Even still to this day, like it's still difficult for me to do. And I noticed that when I'm working with students, oftentimes students who identify as men of color, there's also this like hesitancy to ask for help. So I think that that's one of those things that, I don't know, like I absolutely, like it definitely resonated with me. So
yeah, like trying to be vulnerable.
Yeah, as vulnerable as possible. For me, that was what pretty much got to me as well, like the vulnerability aspect of things. For me, just like even before college, I know the question is, how has being a man of color influenced your college experience? But for me, I think that I was influenced in high school, like before going to college. And as a first generation student, I always doubted myself with like, do I even belong in college? It was a sense of belonging factor for me. Like, is college for me? I was very big into sports. So I think that was my outlet to going to college as well. I was really dependent on my athleticism and me being good at sports to help me carry just my motivation to go to college. Because like back in high school, I went to a public schools, which isn't the best schools to go to. And a lot of my teachers actually like told me and other students that we wouldn't even go to college. Like jail was something that was definitely like brought up within like all of our spaces with this, which is really toxic and really unhealthy. But that was my experience when I was thinking about actually going to college, and that made me doubt myself even more actually. Especially being the first gen, you don't think that you can do it when your teachers are doubting you, because that's supposed to be your number one supporters, right? So I was thinking like, dang, like is college even for me if my teachers are doing this? But I wanted to change the statistic of my family and just of men of color in general on like getting to college and actually graduating from college. So I think just having a mindset and just like flossing up my skills on like, yeah, I'm gonna overcome, you know, the barrier of going to college, and I'm gonna break that from my family. I think that was like my main purpose and my motivation of like going to college outside of playing sports. So yeah, it was really tricky and definitely a roller coaster for me.
Did y'all have I remember high school at Addison, when I went to public school, there used to always be military recruiters in the cafeteria. Did y'all have that? And they would do they do pull-up competitions in the cafeteria and stuff, and they would and then I remember there would be presentations, so they would specifically, like most classes, there would be presentations from the military recruiters, and then in like the honors AP classes was where we would get the like college presentations. You know, so it was like purposely creating that like dichotomy, kind of like you're talking about. You know, I was looking at, I was in like a blend, so I was in some AP classes, so I got that. But it's just interesting to think about. You know, they went out of their way, so they're like, oh, you know, over here, you know, versus like creating that mindset, you know, and some of the other groups. It's interesting.
I think y'all touch on a lot of different areas that I kind of been thinking about too, because it's very like an onion, like y'all mentioned, right? Peeling back those layers of what that means. Because you have the societal kind of image about what does it mean to be male of color, right? And what those influences are in society that are public. But at the same time, our cultural backgrounds, our cultural connections, traditions, and languages and things of that nature, how does that have an influence upon that too, and those teachings that come with it? So it's very multi-layered, complex in various different areas. So it was very difficult for me. So you all are touching on a lot of those areas that kind of got me thinking as first gen to first in the family to go, how's that going to look? Do I belong? Do I fit these spaces? What should I say? How should I say things? Or am I welcome to again? I think those are a lot of things that run through my mind. So I'll share it on that.
What do y'all think as far as this relating to like folks advocating for yourselves, right? So like, I know for me, I was very hesitant to like speak up if I thought something was wrong, or if I felt like something, I don't know, I just like didn't agree with something. And I felt like that hesitancy had a lot to do with like power dynamics and things like that relating to being a man of color. on campus. And I think like all of this is saying all of this. I think there's a caveat that I need to acknowledge is like I'm an Asian man, right? Like Asian men attend college. Like we're not necessarily like a marginalized or underrepresented, I should say, population on college campuses. So I just think that there's a little bit of context there too regarding like how I might have been treated or how I might have like experienced college that might have been a little bit different than y'all. But with that, still the whole advocating for yourself aspect of things, I don't know, like what did y'all think about that?
That's hard. I think advocating for yourself. Again, it goes back to that concept of like, I think pride. I don't want to say this across the board, but a good handful of us, or a good many of us, at least my experience of people I were connected with, and myself personally, it's hard to ask for help, hard to advocate for yourself at some points. Like I could do it on my own, and I think that concept kind of goes in there that you're a person, you're the head, depending on what how you were raised and things of that nature. It's always this concept that, well, you're the man of the house, you're the warrior, right? You need to go out, you need to find, you need to make a way, you need to make it happen, right? Those expectations, exactly. But in advocating for yourself, it's like you're the self-advocate, you're the one trying to do it, but asking for help to help support you in that was always a difficult thing to traverse.
Yeah.
And you hear that across students too, working with students, especially students with my population too, the Native communities. Sometimes those are some interesting conversations we've had.
Yeah.
That's real, man. It's like you're being bred to become that leader, right? That alpha, whatever, just the man of the house or whatever. So who are you going to go ask for help? Aren't you the one supposed to be guiding people? I don't know. That is interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And it's also just, when I think about asking for help, it's also, am I being validated in that in what I bring up? I guess like it was almost, I can even remember some times where it almost felt like, I guess now people use the term like gaslighting and stuff, I guess, I don't know, but just like in terms of I'll share something and then they're like, are you sure that's what you experienced? Like, maybe they meant it this way. And it's like, I don't really get what they meant.
Right.
This is what happened. But like that's hard and then that definitely doesn't make you want to share more because when you try to share, it doesn't really get validated in that moment, which I think has shifted. I think there's definitely more and more of that showing up. Like Thrive is a good example, and I can think of some more spaces too, right, that are doing a better job of that. So I think it's also a good part about context, right, is that like I think there's being efforts to move forward of like really figuring that out, but it's complicated because we also just generally think of like when we think of men or masculinity, we think of privileged, right, which generally speaking that makes sense, but it gets more difficult when you get into those nuances and peel back the layers of then how does that show up and when you're trying to navigate college, because at the end of the day men of color have the lowest retention success rates of any groups on campus. So when you talk about privilege, like where does that, right? So there's just been a heavy focus outward on other populations, and obviously we have our Men of Color initiative, we're here for that. But I guess my point of bringing that up is that there's starting to be some more conversations around that, because I think there's just preconceived kind of like just assumptions or conceptions around like men and the privilege and etc. I don't know if that would make sense, but like I think that's a big part as well of what we're talking about. It's interesting to think about.
And I think you all like cover like the most part on like how to advocate for yourself, and that is something that we actually communicate with our Men of Color initiative, our cohorts about on like how to do that and like how to find like your purpose on campus, because it starts there with like finding your purpose, knowing your journey, knowing your identity, knowing what's like your values, knowing your morals, all types of things like that. So I feel like just like growing up in my undergrad experiences, I think that I challenged myself on like, what am I going to do to advocate for myself? I'm very intentional about changing the statistic, right? But what am I going to do to like leave my legacy on campus? Unfinished legacy. But like leaving a legacy. So advocating not just for myself, but for other people as well. So within doing that, I tell all of my younger brothers and sisters, just people in general, to just be a voice for the voiceless. Everybody isn't going to be able to vocalize their experience, or they're not going to have that skill to do that. So the first step is to try to be a voice for the voiceless, like be a voice for the people that can't do that, especially if you have that as a skill. And that's something that I had as a skill of just being extroverted, being able to connect with people, being able to just adjust in general, and just being understanding of different walks of life. So like through that, I was able to just see what I can do for myself when it comes to advocating for different things. Like one thing that I did in grad school is I had to take the GRE for higher education. And I was like, the GRE is a standardized test. This is just to keep, people of color away from going to college and getting into college and all of that other stuff that comes along with that, all those barriers and challenges that comes with that. But one thing I wanted to do is challenge myself, and that's what some of my mentors allowed me to do. That's what I did in class as well. And we talked about those standardized tests, and through conversations and having those dialogues with professors that are on campus and directors, we were able to get the GRE removed for the students in the future. So now anybody that's going into the higher ed degree, they don't have to take that GRE test because we navigated through those challenges and they completely waived that. So that's just like an example on like where I challenged myself in graduate school on like to be a voice for not only myself but for the voiceless as well. But that was a good talk. Okay. One more?
Next question.
Is it?
Yeah, let's get another one.
Okay, another one? All right, let's see.
It's like
Let's see. All right, mix them out a little bit.
I'm anxious.
Alrighty, so this one says, let's just shout out our biggest supporters really quick. Speaking of that.
Biggest supporters.
Biggest supporters that you have had maybe in undergrad or at this time now. Just shout out a couple really quick.
I mean, undergrad and I guess currently, but I'm gonna shout out Bob McCune over at Trio currently. Back in the day, he was a young professional staff member when I was.
What are you trying to say?
So he was like, we weren't that different in age, but you definitely provided like a lot of support. So I appreciate that. Dan, I mentioned in the last episode, who's currently texting me about something. I don't know what. There's another one I'll shout out. Similar situation, like a little bit older than me, but not that much. But he was definitely around there to help me provide any answers, any questions I might have had. Yeah.
I think I'd give a shout out to all my men of color professors. There's a lot of them. I think this is
shout out to the real ones.
Yeah, they've been there. They set down the foundation, pay that way for us to kind of make it a reality that I'm seeing someone in this space in front of the class, teaching, talking. So I want to give a shout out to all my professors.
That makes a difference.
Undergrad, tribal college, and my and at grad school too. But also Steve Martin, Muskogee Creek, my brother Steve. You real, keeping it real, always important. Dan too, and Bob, and Brian Francis, my brother too, as well too, at CCC, Coconut Community College. So a lot more people, but just leave it at that. Family too.
Yeah, I want to take a retweet on that, shouting out just the men of color that's on campus, because the gap between men and female, right, men and women, it's a large gap when it comes to like men of color working on campus outside of the female gender or the non-binary gender as well. It's a large gap, and we don't have like a lot of people that we can look up to, a lot of professors that we can look up to, a lot of mentors that we can look up to on campus because of that gap. So definitely shout out to the men of color that are on campus. Shout out to TJ Brown. Love you for sure. Shout out to Michelle McKelvey. That's definitely been a person that I've been side by side with throughout my journey in the Thrive Center, working with men of color, and that's her area of expertise as well. Shout out to you all as well, because I didn't know a lot of men of color who was working as professional staff on campus until I came to the Thrive Center. And fun fact, we're at about like 90% above with professional staff of color here in the Thrive Center, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere between the lines of like 90% and above of our professional staff are identifying as people of color. So I really love that aspect of things with our office too. But shout out to everybody who's putting in work. You got any, Brian?
Yeah. I got one thing, Derwin, I thought about before I get to my supporters, what you were talking about. I guess both of y'all, faculty of color, everyone there, seeing folks doing the thing. I know that's definitely how some students felt you giving that presentation the other day at the welcome.
Oh yeah.
It's always cool seeing that. Yeah, I just know I've heard from students, it's cool to see, like you said, seeing men of color, you know, in your case, particularly Native men in spaces, is very cool to see. So,
Yeah.
and it's always a great presentation. So thank you. For me, I mean, the big one that first comes I already mentioned is TJ. But I met TJ like 2012 when I was an undergrad, and he was honestly I don't think I would have graduated without him, to be honest.
You gotta do this.
Oh yeah, TJ, where you at? Where you at? Come home. Where you at? He's having fun out there in Pasadena, but
Cali.
he worked for the Thrive-ish type office when I was undergrad. It was Odime. They changed the name. Shout out to Odime, the OG name. And yeah, I just got connected to him, and he was just there when I was struggling with my transition. My grades were really rough. I didn't really have a lot of community, so he kind of took me under his wing and became a mentor of mine. And I knew him all through college, grad school, which led me to work for the summer bridge program over there. And then he moved over here. He told me there was an opening. You know, I earned the job, but I'm sure he did. But I came over here to work, you know, so he's been a huge factor. So it's him. And then obviously there's Gary too, Theo Gary. Shout out to you, man. He's another one that worked in Odime. Otherwise, my fraternity brothers, you know, we're big. Leonard Theta Phi. They were big for me in terms of finding that community. And then coming here, just thrive in general. You know, I think that was a big part that really helped my transition, was just having, kind of like you were alluding to, Waun, just having that men of color presence and where I was heading. Because it was actually part of the reason that I chose here, right? Because I turned down on some other jobs with like a little bit more pay, better title, whatever. But just being able a chance to come over here and feel like I'd have a support system, because having TJ here, you know, shout out to Patrick Bryan, my supervisor,
Shout
also
out
my
to
fraternity
Patrick.
brother, right?
What's that?
Another big one. Derwin was here, you know, I got to meet Derwin, it was awesome. Bob, you know, it was just a bunch of folks. Chris came at the same time. Martel was here, shout out to Martel. Right, like there was a big men of color presence, so that just made that feel a lot easier of a transition. And I knew I'd feel supported coming here. So that was a big part of it as well, and I do, and I continue to. So like again, like you said, shout out to all of y'all.
That's good.
And
Shout out
everyone
to
in
you.
the Thrive space. So
Shout out to
What about Chris? Yeah, Chris.
All right. All right. You want one more?
yeah, we can do one
Quick
more.
one.
Yeah.
I got something to do? All right. I pulled out two.
Oh,
So one of them says finding community on campus. So how can you find community on campus, or have you found community on campus?
Mm-hmm.
Anything to do with like finding community on campus.
MLC cohort.
Yep, MLC cohort.
MLC.
Definitely. If you're a man of color listening to this podcast right now,
You better walk to the Thrive Center right now.
Just come to the Thrive
Close the
Center.
computer and walk.
Yeah. And then the next one
Unless it's after
is
5.
yeah, come through. And then the next one is resources on this campus that have been supportive for men of color. So just choose anyone. I'm gonna always mention MOC, Men of Color Initiative, the cohort. It's guided from your first to your senior year. This is our third year, going into our third year with doing our Men of Color Initiative with our cohorts. So if you're a first year student coming in, that's where we start with you. And then the goal is to get you to the finish line, right? The goal is to keep you here, keep you focused, keep you motivated, keep you disciplined, allow you to have some type of personal growth, keep you connected to the campus when it comes to resources. We bring resources to our meetings, almost like, I would say like once or twice a month. You will probably see some different folks, some other men of color, maybe faculty or men of color that are over different resources outside of the Thrive Center. So we get you connected with that. We do a lot of career development. So a lot of folks get prepared. We do professional headshots. We go over interviewing skills. We bring in internships and research opportunities. So you rock. Shout out to you all for coming in and working with the guys as well. But Men of Color Initiative, I'm gonna shout them out for a resource. Life Lab is a good one if you want to get connected with career development or anything career oriented. Go over to JT with Life Lab. You both grew up in Milwaukee, but JT is over there, so shout out to him as well. He's another Man of Color on campus that does some phenomenal work.
Yeah.
And does work with Blue Chip Men of Color as well. So Blue Chip is another leadership program that we also work with, and you also transition to the Blue Chip leadership program through the cohort. So yeah, those are just a couple.
cultural centers too.
Yeah,
Shout out to cultural centers. They do a lot of work with masculinities. They have men of color working there as well. There's a word I wanted.
Mocha?
Representation. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah, men of color representation as well. You know.
I mean, I'm throwing out like New Start, Trio.
Yeah.
I mean, looking back,
Trio.
New Start was huge for me to connect with people of color, men of color. Rudy McCormick, another person to shout out.
Yeah.
It's a goat.
Yeah, Jacob Shirley.
Shout out to Jacob. You want to tell us any more?
Oh, the Veteran Center. I think they really provide representation there too as well and support trio programs. Definitely all trio programs across the board, upward bound, especially young men coming into the university trying to make that step. So definitely a great program. Yeah.
I think the Ronald E. McNair Scholar is through Trio. I was a Ronald E. McNair Scholar through undergrad, and that's for minoritized students. So anybody who is in that minoritized category, you are eligible to be a Ronald E. McNair Scholar, which is a research program. And that's how I got my graduate program actually funded. I mean, of course, with my effort too, with like applying to grad schools and doing things like that. But I was able to get grad school applications waived. I was able to go to different campuses through my undergrad experience to get to get a sense of belonging through other environments in different states. So I was able to go through that and meet a lot of people and network through that research opportunity. So Ronald E. McNair Scholar is a good way to build community and to just shape some type of
What's the other
environment. It was find a community on campus and resources. So
Okay. Yeah, we kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
Just come through Thrive.
come through.
Really
Come to the Bass Center.
Yeah, come visit Thrive, man. All of our offices are open.
Mm-hmm.
Come through, have a conversation. Maybe you can be on an episode.
Yeah.
No promises, but maybe.
All right, y'all. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Anybody have any last words before we close it out?
Just be vulnerable, you know.
Yeah.
Like if you need support, it's better to ask for it than find out the hard way. That's what happened with me. So
Same.
I think that's the main thing I would say. Just put yourself out there. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to have support. No one does anything alone as much as we want to.
Sure thing.
I think that's the biggest thing. But we're here for you, 100%.
Good one.
For sure. But I appreciate y'all for just sharing your words of wisdom. We got to start somewhere, but that's going to conclude our episode 2, you all. So I hope you all enjoyed our podcast for episode 2. And we will see you all the next time we come together. All right, y'all. Up top.
Shoot. Let's go.